Mercy was never tested when rooms were warm and bellies were full. Mercy was tested when breath thinned to a thread, when fear made honest people cruel, when someone with no rank and no safety had to decide whether to step forward or survive by looking away. Luna Windrider had learned, in kitchens and cellars and locked treatment rooms, that power called itself law, while tenderness was treated like weakness. Yet on the mountain road to Stormborn Keep, with sleet carving her face raw and forged papers tucked beneath her coat, she understood one hard truth with painful clarity. If she turned back, a child she had never met would die before dawn. By the time she reached the fortress gate, both hands were numb around the straps of her healing satchel. Her boots were stiff with ice, her lungs ached from the altitude, and the brand on her left shoulder burned as if cold could wake old fire. Stormborn Keep rose from the mountain spine like it had been grown from black stone, not built. Its towers angled against the wind, its banners snapping so hard they sounded like small whips. Then the howl came. One voice from inside the walls, deep with grief. Then another. Then dozens, swelling into a mourning chorus that rolled down the mountain and struck through Luna's ribs. Pack sorrow had a shape to it, and she knew this shape. Death waiting at the door. Death almost in the room. She stumbled the final steps, hit the gate with her palm, and nearly slid to her knees before the guards hauled her upright. Name. One of them barked, spear angled across her chest. She swallowed sleet. Luna Vale. House-trained healer. Transfer papers from Northridge Service Quarter. It was the name on the forged document, not the one she had been born to. Not the one that could get her killed. The older guard snatched the papers, scanned the seal, then looked at her satchel. You chose a poor night to arrive, servant. Inside the keep, another howl broke. Closer now. Someone shouting for hot water. Someone else cursing the healers by name. Luna pressed shaking fingers against the leather flap of her satchel. Your air was struck with moonbane, not a full dose. Layered. Delayed collapse at the heart and lungs. Wolf sleep after fever spike. If that pattern is in there, I can help. Both guards stilled. The younger one shifted first, suspicion sharpening his face. Who told you what happened? No one. She drew one careful breath. I used to prepare compounds for people who should never have had access to them. The older guard's gaze dropped to the edge of her collar where the scarred crescent of a servant brand showed above damp wool. His expression changed, not to pity, but to calculation. Branded. Discardable. Useful if she worked. Simple to bury if she lied. He executes spies, the younger guard said quietly. He has hanged liars from that inner wall. Then don't call me a healer, Luna said. Her voice cracked from cold and exhaustion, but she kept it steady enough. Call me desperate. She did not remember crossing the threshold. One step she was under sleet, the next she was on warm stone with torchlight jolting her vision, and then darkness tipped sideways. She hit the floor hard enough to bruise her cheek, and heard, as if from the end of a long corridor, someone swearing that she had fainted on the king's own entry tiles. When she woke, rough wool was draped over her, and the keep smelled of wet fur, smoke, and bitter herbs boiled too long. Voices pressed around her in jagged fragments. No response to root stimulants. Pupils fixed after second seizure. Tell the Alpha before moonset, he must prepare the rites. Luna pushed herself up too fast. The room spun, then steadied. She was in a side chamber off a larger hall, and through the open archway she saw a bed surrounded by healers in gray and blue wraps. On the bed lay a small body under layered blankets, too still for sleep. Kalen. She did not know how she knew his name then, only that the old pulse buried in her blood answered him like a bell struck beneath water, low and resonant, impossible to ignore. Her fingers tingled. Her pulse kicked. A healer intercepted her with an irritated hiss. "You are out of place." "I need to see his eyes and tongue," she said. "You need to sit before you collapse again." "I have seen this poison before." She met the woman's stare. "Please." The healer almost laughed. "Do you think grief has made us fools? We have 10 years more training than you, girl." The word girl landed like a slap from another life, and with it came memory so sharp she could taste iron. "You are not a person in this house, Luna, only hands. If we call, you answer. If you speak without permission, we cut your rations. If you run, we return you marked deeper." Lady Marrow's voice, smooth as polished bone. Behind her, Theron leaning in the doorway, smiling with no warmth at all. "It is not rations she fears," he had said that night, tracing the brand at Luna's shoulder until her whole body locked. "It is being unseen. Tell me to claim you properly, and I will make everyone kneel." She had said nothing then. Silence had been the only shield she owned. Now, in Stormborn Keep, she forced her jaw loose. "Your heir's nails," she told the healer. "Were they blue before he stopped waking?" The woman's mouth snapped shut. "Was there a sweet smell under the fever?" Luna pressed. "Like crushed winter mint?" A beat of silence, then grudgingly, "Yes." "Moonbane braided with frost poppy and cedar ash," Luna said. "It mimics organ failure in wolves. It is meant to look like fate." The healer stepped back, not convinced, no longer dismissive. A new presence entered the chamber without announcing itself, and every voice thinned out at once. Luna looked up and saw him for the first time. Griffin Stormborn filled the doorway in dark leathers and a rain-heavy cloak, his hair damp, his expression carved from control so severe it looked painful. Nothing about him was ornamental. He moved like a weapon forced to stand still. His eyes were not glowing now, but they held a fierce amber depth that made instinct sharpen along her spine. "This is the outsider?" he asked. The older healer bowed her head. "She claims Moonbane pattern recognition. We had already prepared to announce no recovery before dawn." No recovery before dawn. The sentence rang in Luna's ears like a verdict. Griffin's gaze pinned her. "If you are lying in my house while my son dies, there is nowhere on this mountain you can hide." His voice was low and controlled, which was worse than shouting. Shouting was hot. This was winter steel. Luna climbed to her feet, wobbling only once. "I am not asking for trust. I am asking for one night beside him." A murmur moved through the healers. One muttered that desperation made charlatans of everyone. Griffin took one step closer. "Who trained you?" "No one who deserves the credit." "Who sent you?" "No one." She held his stare, though fear ran under her skin like a live wire. "I came because I heard the Stormborn heir had been struck, and the description matched what I escaped." His eyes narrowed at one word. Escaped. She knew what he saw. Torn sleeves, mountain mud to the knee, forged papers drying on the table, servant brand half hidden and impossible to miss once noticed. Spy. Bait. Trap dressed as mercy. The truth lived under all of it, clawing to be spoken. "I am tired of living by other people's names. I am tired of men deciding what my body means. I am tired of watching children pay for power games." In her mind, the words came in present tense, urgent and bare. "I am here. I am terrified. I stay anyway." Griffin turned his head toward the bed where Kaelin lay silent beneath blankets that rose too little with each breath. Something in his face fractured for a heartbeat, then resealed into command. "How long?" he asked without looking back. "If the poison reached deep sleep stage, you have hours," Luna said. "Not days." "Can you cure him?" "No." She did not soften it. "But I can pull him toward waking long enough for his body to fight. If I fail, you lose nothing you have not already been told to expect." The chamber waited. At last, Griffin looked at her again. "One night," he said. "You do not leave this room. You do not touch anything I have not seen. 2 guards at the door. If my son worsens under your hands, I end this myself." Luna bowed once, not submissive, simply acknowledging terms she could survive. One night. As the guards moved into place and the healers reluctantly made space at the bedside, thunder rolled over the mountain. Luna set her satchel down, unwrapped her shaking fingers, and pressed her palm lightly against the boy's sternum. Beneath her hand, his heartbeat fluttered like a trapped bird against a closing cage. Far below the keep, in the dark pine passes she had crossed before dusk, riders were already climbing toward Stormborn banners with a message she had hoped to outrun. Theron never let valuable things vanish quietly, and Luna had stolen from him the one thing he believed was his by right: her silence. She kept her hand on Kaelin's chest and counted under her breath, feeling each uneven beat skip and scrape as if the child were running uphill inside a dream he could not wake from. The skin beneath her palm was too cool for a fever victim, and that was the cruel signature of Moonbane in its late stage, the body burning itself out while the surface turned still. She opened her satchel with her free hand, laid out 3 wrapped bundles of herbs, and asked for a bowl of hot water without taking her eyes off the boy. No one moved. Luna lifted her gaze to the nearest healer. "If you want him alive, I need steam, salt, and juniper ash now." The woman hesitated, then looked at Griffin. He gave a single nod. Motion returned to the room in hard, clipped bursts. A bowl was brought. Coals were stoked. Someone set a clean cloth beside her elbow. The 2 guards at the door remained rigid, spears angled, as if she might pull a blade from her sleeves and strike the sleeping child instead of saving him. She had seen that expression before in manor corridors and auction yards, the measured contempt reserved for marked women who knew too much and owned nothing. She ground frost leaf with her thumb against the inner lid of a copper tin until the oils rose sharp and bitter. "He cannot swallow safely," she said. "This goes through breath and skin." One healer crossed her arms. "If his lungs are failing, inhaled compounds may finish what the poison started. If his lungs stop, he dies either way." Luna dipped cloth in the steaming mixture, wrung it, then held it under Kaelin's nose in brief intervals. "Moonbane wants deep sleep. I need him hovering at the threshold, not sinking." Griffin stepped to the bedside opposite her. He did not crowd, but his presence filled the space like stone fills a riverbed, redirecting everything around it. "Tell me exactly what you are doing." She appreciated the question more than she expected. Orders she could survive. Clarity she could trust. "I am provoking memory responses," she said. "Scent first, then pulse entrainment. If he remembers safe rhythms, his wolf may answer. If his wolf answers, the body follows." A muscle in Griffin's jaw tightened. "And if his wolf does not answer?" "Then you hold him while he goes." The words landed like a strike. The nearest guard flinched. One healer hissed at Luna's bluntness. Griffin only stared at his son and said, very quietly, "Continue." She mixed juniper ash into warm salt water, painted a thin line across Kaelin's wrists, then one at the base of his throat. Her fingers shook from fatigue, and she willed them steady by force. Fear made clumsy hands killed. "I am not in Marrow House. I am not waiting outside locked doors. I am not begging for permission to help a child breathe. I am here, on stone, under storm banners, with witnesses. I am shaking, but I am not small. If I fail while trying. If I succeed, no one can unsee it. Keep counting, keep breathing. Keep your hand where his heart can find you. Do not look at your brand. Do not look at the guards. Look at the boy, only the boy." She bent low and spoke to Kaelin as if he were merely drowsy after a long run. "Your father is here. The hearth is warm. The snow can wait. You need to come back now." At first, there was nothing but the crackle of coals and the wind pressing against shuttered windows. Then his pulse gave a stronger thud beneath her hand, followed by a long pause that made her own heartbeat stutter. Again, she whispered. Come on. Again. Kalen's fingers twitched. So slight she nearly doubted it. Then his chest lifted a fraction more with the next breath. The healers leaned in at once, muttering to each other, startled into attention they had not offered her a quarter hour earlier. One of them reached for the boy's wrist, and Luna caught her sleeve. Not yet. Too much touch can drag him deeper. The healer bristled. You command no one here. Griffin's voice cut through the room. Tonight she does. Silence followed, taut and immediate. Luna felt the weight of his decree settle over her shoulders heavier than any cloak. Not safety. Not yet. But a line drawn where everyone could see it. Another breath. Another. Kalen's pulse remained weak, but the pattern shifted from collapse to fight. Luna let herself inhale fully for the first time since entering the keep. Then the child seized. It hit without warning, a violent arch through spine and neck, teeth clenched, hands curled hard enough the knuckles blanched. Luna moved on instinct, rolling him gently to keep his airway clear, bracing his shoulder while calling for the vial of poppythorn tincture. A healer passed it. Luna measured 3 drops onto her fingertip and rubbed it along Kalen's gums. Hold his legs, she snapped. No one moved quickly enough. Griffin was already there, one hand anchoring the boy without force. Just firm pressure and calm command. Kalen, stay with me. The seizure eased in jagged increments. Kalen went limp, breaths shallow but present. Sweat cooled on Luna's back all at once, leaving her chilled to the bone. Griffin looked at her hands, at the tincture, at the ash marks on his son's skin. That was not in the records from our healer manuals. No, she said. Moonbane altered for children is not in most manuals. His gaze sharpened. How do you know that detail? She should have answered carefully. She should have lied with precision, offered an old mentor's name, kept the walls of her history sealed. Exhaustion stripped her of strategy. Because the house I served tested dosages on wolves they believed no one would miss. The confession hung in the chamber like smoke. Horror crossed one healer's face before she masked it. The older guard at the door looked away, jaw tight, as if he had heard too many stories like that and done too little. Griffin's expression changed by a degree no outsider would catch. Anger, yes, but not directed at her. A colder thing, older than this room. Kalen's pulse dipped again. Luna pressed harder, trying to re-establish rhythm, and the world narrowed to skin, heartbeat, and the thin thread of breath under her palm. She leaned closer, letting an old melody rise from memory, one her mother used to hum while polishing silver she would never own. The tune was simple, built for repetition. A cradle rhythm from the Windrider line disguised as servant song, so it could survive in places where names were punished. She sang the first phrase. Kalen's heartbeat answered with a fragile quickening. She sang the second phrase and felt, startlingly, another pulse brush the edge of her awareness, deep and storm-strong, not the child's, Griffin's. His breathing had matched hers without instruction, slow inhale, slower release, as if some buried instinct understood the structure of what she was doing and stepped into it beside her. The room receded. Coals, rain, wet leather, cedar, and iron. A guard shifted near the door, perhaps stepping closer, perhaps only adjusting weight. Griffin misread the movement as threat toward the bed and reached across to pull Luna back from the edge where Kalen's flailing hand might have struck her face. His fingers closed around her wrist. Heat tore through both of them. It was not gentle warmth. It was a sudden blaze under skin, bright and absolute, like touching live lightning and finding it answered from the inside. Luna gasped, Not from pain, but from recognition so fierce it stole language. Every nerve lit. Her pulse slammed. The brand on her shoulder burned once, then went cold as river stone. Griffin inhaled sharply. A rough sound dragged from somewhere below control. His grip loosened but did not release. Amber bled through his irises, then brightened toward gold at the center, predator and man colliding in one stunned stare. The scent in the room shifted to rain ozone and wild cedar, thick enough that even the healers looked up in confusion. Mate. The word struck Luna with equal terror and hunger. No, not hunger alone. Relief so dangerous it felt like grief. Her body remembered another hand, another claim carved without consent, another voice telling her bond and ownership were the same thing if a powerful man decided they were. Panic surged with the old training. Go still, make no sound, survive the moment by disappearing inside it. But this was different. Every instinct she had spent years suppressing sharpened instead of shrinking. A low thrum built in her chest, not submission, but recognition, ancient and alive. The animal part of her went rigid, listening. Griffin stepped back half a pace as if he had touched flame, eyes still locked on hers. For one exposed heartbeat, she felt his shock mirrored in her own, the raw disbelief of someone who had stopped expecting grace and found it waiting at arm's length. Kaylin's heartbeat kicked stronger between them. The room erupted. One healer whispered a prayer. Another said, "By the moon," almost too softly to hear. A guard swore under his breath. The older healer moved forward, then halted when Griffin lifted his hand without looking away from Luna. "No one touches her," he said. His voice was hoarse now, threaded with something he had not allowed into it earlier. Not softness, exactly. Reverence edged with fear. Luna realized he was shaking. Very slightly. Enough to matter. He drew one controlled breath. "Did you feel that?" She could have lied. She could have called it exhaustion, compound fumes, shared stress over a dying child. She could have preserved the thin anonymity her forged papers still offered and delayed the avalanche already starting. Instead, she said, "Yes." The single word altered the room's geometry. Every eye tracked between them, measuring rank, scandal, danger, hope. In pack politics, mate bonds were not private tenderness. They were law, alliance, succession, old debts waking with teeth. Luna withdrew her wrist slowly from his hand and returned her palm to Kaylin's chest, because the boy still mattered more than the storm gathering around them. "He is stabilizing," she said, forcing steadiness into each syllable. "If we lose focus now, we lose him." Griffin's gaze dropped to his son, then rose back to her. Something like decision settled across his features. "Tell me what you need," he said. Quiet. Warmth. No council interruptions. "And I need to keep singing until dawn." "You will have it." He turned to the room, Alpha command snapping back into place though the scent of bond still thrummed in the stone. Out. All but 2 healers and the guards. The chamber emptied in a rustle of cloth and reluctant bows. As the last healer left, thunder rolled across the fortress again, closer this time, and from somewhere below came the blast of a horn from the outer watchtower. One call, then 2 in rapid succession. Incoming riders. Griffin's head angled toward the sound, his expression darkening. Luna did not need prophecy to guess who climbed those passes in the storm, carrying contracts and cruelty like heirlooms. She kept singing, voice low and steady, while Kaylin's pulse beat stronger under her hand, and the Alpha King stood beside her, with gold still burning at the heart of his gaze. The second horn note had barely stopped echoing when Griffin crossed to the door and spoke to the guard in a voice pitched low enough that only the man nearest him caught every word. Orders moved outward fast anyway, carried by posture as much as sound. Torches shifted in the passage. Boots struck stone in disciplined bursts. The keep, braced itself. A captain arrived moments later, rein on his braids, and bowed just inside the threshold. Riders with no house colors at the lower switchback, 6 at least. They raised truce lanterns and asked entry under witness law. Denied? Griffin asked. Held at the outer cut, as commanded. Storm Ice took the north stair. They cannot advance until first light without breaking their mounts. Keep them there. Griffin did not look away from Kaelin. No envoy enters this wing tonight. If they claim urgency, they can pray. The captain hesitated, then risked one more sentence. They named Luna Vale in their hail. Silence tightened across the chamber. Luna felt both healers glance at her and then away. Griffin's answer landed like a shut gate. Then they wait in the dark. When the captain withdrew, Griffin dismissed one of the remaining healers and ordered fresh coals, broth, and dry cloths. He gave directions with exacting calm, but Luna could feel strain running beneath it, a current strong enough to crack granite. His son's pulse had steadied into a fragile rhythm under her hand. If fear broke that rhythm now, all their work would unravel. The chamber thinned to 4 people, then 3 when the younger healer stepped out for supplies. Wind battered the shutters. Rain hissed at the arrow slits. Kaelin slept on, brow damp, breath shallow, but no longer vanishing into those awful pauses that had made the room feel like a grave. Luna's shoulders began to shake once the worst urgency ebbed. Exhaustion arrived with ruthless timing, dragging at the backs of her eyes, making the lines of the room blur at the edges. She kept singing under her breath, the lullaby thread barely above a whisper, until Griffin moved to the chair near the hearth, unfastened his rain-heavy cloak, and crossed back. He stopped beside her and waited until she looked up. "I need your hand steady," he said. "Take this." He settled the cloak around her shoulders from behind, careful and deliberate, his knuckles never brushing her throat, never touching bare skin where her collar had slipped. The gesture held none of Theron's old ownership, none of that forced intimacy disguised as protection. It was practical, almost formal. Still, it struck her harder than the mate pull had, because he could have used the bond as leverage and chose restraint instead. She tried to protest. "You need warmth more than I do. I have reserves you do not." He secured the edge at her collarbone with a bronze clasp. "Do not waste strength arguing." The younger healer returned with a tray. Griffin took the bowl before it reached Luna, tested the temperature with one finger, and set himself on the stone floor beside the bed rather than the carved chair a king would usually claim. He held the cup near her hands. "Drink," he said. "I can hold it." "I know." His tone gentled by a fraction. "Drink anyway." She obeyed because the broth smelled of marrow and thyme, and because her hands had not fully stopped trembling. He steadied the rim while she drank in measured swallows, not hurried, not ashamed. The 2 guards at the door looked pointedly at the opposite wall. When she finished, she set the cup down and reached for Kaelin again. Griffin remained on the floor, shoulders against the bed frame, gaze fixed on his son's face, with a ferocity that looked almost like prayer. "They told me at sunset yesterday he could not hear," he said after a long stretch of shared quiet. "I sat here until dawn speaking to him as if he might answer at any moment. The healers called it denial. Perhaps they were right." Luna wiped broth from her lip with the back of her sleeve. "I do not think they were." His mouth tightened. "I told him about the first time he shifted and tore my best cloak. I told him he still owes me for it. I told him the spring melt will be good this year and he can race the creek if he keeps his feet under him." A rough breath. "He liked the part about the cloak. I thought I saw his mouth move. It did not happen again." For a brief moment, the fortress, the politics, the riders waiting below, all fell away. There was only a father confessing the shape of his fear to a woman he had met hours earlier and should have distrusted absolutely. Luna looked at Kaelin's small hand and then at Griffin's, scarred across the knuckles, open on the stone. Children hear farther than we expect, she said. Sometimes they follow tone before words. Keep talking to him between verses. Keep your breath even. He has to feel the world is waiting, not panicking. He turned toward her then, amber deep in his gaze, and nodded once. Teach me the rhythm. She drew a longer inhale, then sang the first line again, soft and repetitive. Griffin matched her breathing on the next cycle, not perfectly at first, then with increasing precision, until their inhales rose together and eased together, a two-beat anchor around Kaylin's frail pulse. The room seemed to settle around that cadence. Even the storm sounded farther away. Inside her, fear and yearning collided in a confusion she could not name cleanly. I am still waiting for the trapdoor to open. I am waiting for the moment his kindness becomes debt, for the command hidden under the care. I know this choreography. Warmth first, then the hand at the throat, then the sentence that says I owe him because he was gentle once. But nothing in him moves that way. He asks, he listens, he leaves space where other men crowd. I do not know how to stand in space without flinching. I do not know how to trust what is not demanded. The bond keeps pulling, steady and bright, and I am terrified because part of me wants to lean toward it. Part of me already has. Hours thinned into a gray edge at the window slits. By the time the sky began to pale from black to iron, Kaylin's breathing had deepened. Not cured, not safe. Alive enough to keep fighting. Footsteps multiplied in the corridor. The first elder entered without waiting for permission, robes heavy with ceremonial silver, followed by 3 more and 2 council enforcers in chain vests. Their sense came sharp with judgment and sleeplessness. The eldest woman, Mara of the Western Den, looked from Kaylin to Luna and let her gaze settle on the brand near Luna's collar. So the rumors are true, Mara said. A branded servant sits at the heir's throat while the keep locks out witnesses. You gamble succession on a stray. The second elder, lean and hawk-faced, stepped closer to the bed. Her mark carries a false claim scar. That alone is contamination risk in a royal chamber. Chain her until inquiry. One enforcer reached for the cuffs at his belt. Luna rose slowly, pulse punching hard in her ears. She was tired enough that the floor tipped for a second, then righted. Old instincts screamed for silence, for making herself smaller, for surviving by compliance. She forced her chin up anyway. I did not curse your heir, she said. I kept him breathing. Mara's expression did not soften, and perhaps placed him where only you can retrieve him. Convenient. The enforcer advanced another pace. Griffin stood. He moved between Luna and the council circle in one clean step, broad shoulders cutting the room in half. No snarl, no theatrics, only authority honed to a lethal edge. No chains, he said. Mara lifted her chin. You are compromised. Mate sign was witnessed in this chamber. I am aware of what was witnessed. Then you know protocol. Isolate the outsider. Restore council control. Griffin's voice dropped lower. Under ancient Alpha Sanctuary law, invoked by my line and sealed in this keep foundation, any guest under my direct protection is untouchable until judgment at a full moon circle hearing. I invoke it now for Luna Windrider, called Vale. The use of her true surname hit her like a bell strike. He had chosen to say it in front of elders, not as accusation, but as recognition. The hawk-faced elder bared his teeth. That law carries censure if abused. Record it, Griffin said. Record that I accepted censure at dawn, rather than permit fear to murder my son. Mara's eyes narrowed. You would risk political fracture for her. I would risk much more for the heir's breath. His gaze swept the enforcers. Any claw raised against her is raised against my line. For 3 taut heartbeats, no one moved. Then Mara gave a curt signal and the enforcer's hand dropped from his cuffs. "You bind us to process," she said, each word clipped. "Very well. She remains under watch. You will answer this before the full council." "I will." Mara glanced at Kaelin, then back at Luna. Calculation replacing open contempt. "If the child worsens, Sanctuary will not shield her from consequence." Luna held her stare. "Then pray he improves." The elders withdrew in a rustle of robes and cold perfume. The enforcers followed, reluctant, and the corridor noise thinned again to guard boots and distant wind. Griffin turned at once to the doorway. "Captain Ivar." A man with a scar across his brow stepped in and struck his fist to his chest. Griffin spoke with brisk precision. "Your unit takes this corridor. No one enters without my word or Luna's. Rotate every 2 hours. If any council member objects, send them to me." "Yes, Alpha." "And hear this clearly. Kaelin is not moved, examined, or dosed unless Luna approves it first. Not by elders, not by healers, not by me." Ivar's eyes flicked to Luna, surprised, naked, and brief. Then he bowed. "Understood." When the captain left, the chamber felt strangely larger, as if the walls had shifted outward by inches. She could finally breathe inside. Luna stared at Griffin, at the man who had just spent political capital he had guarded for a century, on a woman he could have sacrificed with one order. "You gave me authority in front of them," she said. "You earned it in front of me." "They will make you pay for this." A shadow of weary humor touched his mouth, the first she had seen. "They already have. I have endured worse than committee outrage." Despite everything, a small, startled laugh escaped her. It lasted barely a breath and vanished, but it was real. Griffin seemed to hear how rare it was, and did not press the moment. He crossed to Kaelin, checked the child's pulse with 2 fingers, and looked back at Luna. "Can you keep going?" She adjusted the cloak around her shoulders and returned her palm to the boy's chest, her hand steadied against his warmth. "Yes." This time, when Griffin stepped close enough that his sleeve brushed hers, she did not flinch. The quiet that settled after her laugh lasted only a handful of breaths. A knock struck the door in a coded rhythm, 3 short, 1 long. Captain Ivar entered at once, water still dripping from his cloak hem, a narrow iron tube in his gloved hand. He did not cross fully into the chamber. "Outer Cut sent this under witness seal," he said. "Riders claim it bears terms that concern the heir's survival." Griffin took the tube without breaking eye contact with Ivar. "Names." The lead gave Theron Stormborn and invoked blood contract witness law. Luna's fingers locked against Kaelin's blanket. The name did not arrive as sound alone. It arrived as a memory of iron locks, silk gloves, and a smile that had always come half a second after pain. Ivar continued, voice clipped. 4 witnesses with him, all wearing contract rings from the old Eastern tribunals. 2 rogues besides. They remain at the lower switchback under our arrows. Griffin dismissed him with a nod and waited until the door shut again. Then he cracked the wax seal with his thumb. The emblem stamped into the black wax showed a split moon crossed by a hooked line. Theron's private crest from the years when he had still moved through Stormborn halls with legal standing and polished charm. He unfolded the parchment and read in silence, jaw tightening by increments. When he finished, he handed it to Luna without comment. Her pulse thudded in her ears as she scanned the script she knew too well, all elegant loops and careful spacing, cruelty dressed as civility. Beloved Luna, you have wandered far in borrowed names. Return to me by moonrise, denounce Griffin publicly as unfit, and the antidote key to Kaelin's Moonbane sequence will be delivered untouched. Refuse, and the child's next decline will not answer your songs. You are lawfully bound to me by mark and witness. I will reclaim what is mine with council sanction or without it. Theron Stormborn, first bonded by scar and oath. At the bottom sat 4 signatures, each pressed with tribunal seal. Witnesses. Not bluff, then. A legal weapon sharpened for public use. Griffin watched her fold the parchment with deliberate care, as though neat edges could keep her hands from shaking. "Say what I am missing," he said. Luna set the page down on the stool beside the broth cup. "He is not asking for surrender. He is staging succession theater." Her voice felt scraped raw, but it held. "If I return to him willingly, he presents himself as lawful claimant through me. If Kaelin dies after that, he calls it your failure to protect your heir. Then he moves for regency with witness backing." Griffin's gaze sharpened. "Through you." "Through my blood," she corrected, and made herself keep going. "Theron learned, years ago, that my line carries dormant royal access markers. Windrider blood can wake relic runes in old thrones and treaty basins. He wanted that leverage more than he wanted me alive." She touched the scar at her shoulder through the cloak, a brief motion she could not seem to stop. "The false claim brand was his shortcut. If he could present me as bonded property, he could force ritual access without proving consent." The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "He poisoned my son to draw you into reach," Griffin said, each word cut clean. "Yes." Luna lifted her chin. "And to make me choose between a child's breath and my own freedom, because he knows exactly where I break." For a long moment Griffin said nothing. When he did speak, his tone had gone calm in the way storms went calm at the center. "You are not breaking alone." She almost believed him at once, and that frightened her as much as Theron's letter. A second knock sounded, brisk and formal this time. Mara entered with 2 council scribes and the hawk-faced elder at her shoulder. Her attention snapped first to the parchment on the stool, then to Luna, then to Griffin standing too close to both. "Word of a blood contract delegation reached the hall," Mara said. "By law, we must hear their petition." "By sanctuary law, my guest is not paraded before hostile claimants," Griffin replied. Mara's expression did not move. "Sanctuary protects from clause, not from testimony. If those witnesses validate a prior bond claim, your invocation becomes compromised." Luna stepped in before Griffin could answer. "There was no true bond. There was coercion and forged consent under captivity." The hawk-faced elder gave a thin smile. "Convenient distinction." "Accurate distinction," Luna said, meeting him fully. "A mark cut into skin while someone is restrained does not call the moon. It calls infection." Mara lifted one hand, silencing the room. "Then prove it in circle when called. Until then, we proceed by record. The delegation will be held at the lower hall under guard and heard at second bell." Griffin's shoulders squared. "My son does not survive committee timing." Mara glanced at Kaelin, whose breathing had roughened again into shallow pulls. "Then if this letter speaks true, perhaps the woman should consider terms." The sentence hit like thrown stone. Luna felt its impact in the old place behind her ribs where obedience had once lived. "I am in the same trap with different walls. Give yourself and the child breathes. Refuse, and you are called selfish, called liar, called curse." I know this script. It wore silk in Marrow House and silver in Stormborn halls, but the grammar is the same. Yield quietly so powerful people can keep their hands clean. I am tired of being clean evidence in other people's records. I am tired of being useful only when I vanish. She looked at Mara and said, "If I walk to him, he does not stop at me. He takes your laws apart one witness at a time until none of you can tell consent from ownership." Mara held her gaze, unreadable. "Second bell," she repeated, and withdrew with the scribes. When the door shut, the chamber felt smaller again, crowded by decisions. Griffin moved to the hearth and fed 2 new logs to the fire with clipped efficiency, as if action might keep rage from taking shape. "I will not put you in that hall," he said. They will drag me there if I refuse. Then they drag through me first. The words should have sounded like dominance. Instead, they sounded like a line laid down for both of them, costly and deliberate. By mid-morning, sleet had turned to thin, needling rain that rattled against the arrow slits like thrown seeds. Kalen worsened by degrees. Not collapse. Not yet. But a draining retreat from the small gains they had won overnight. His pulse thinned. His fingertips cooled. Luna altered steam intervals, changed tincture timing, and sang until her throat felt flayed. Griffin stayed within arm's reach, speaking to his son between verses steady as a drumbeat. At one point, as Luna rewrapped the ash line at Kalen's wrist, Griffin crouched beside her and spoke low enough that the guards could not hear. "Tell me exactly what he did," he said. "Not the legal version, the lived one." She kept her eyes on the cloth strip while she answered. "He selected girls who had nowhere to report harm. Servants, debt wards, branded runaways. He framed control as protection and pain as privilege. He never struck in public. He preferred witnesses after." Her breath caught, steadied. "When he marked me, he invited 2 contract clerks and called it pre-bond assurance. I was 17 and locked in a treatment room." Griffin's hand flattened on the stone, knuckles whitening. "He did not touch her. I should have seen him sooner. You were not there. I brought him into this fortress years ago." His voice roughened. "That is near enough." She turned then, really looking at him, and found not performative fury but grief threaded with accountability. It unsettled her in ways she could not shield against. Men in power usually defended themselves first. Griffin was doing the opposite, and the mate thread between them pulled taut, with a fierce, quiet certainty. Pressure mounted from every corridor. Messengers arrived and left in rotating waves. Elders demanding attendance, ward captains requesting authority to reposition archers, quartermasters reporting panic spreading through lower dens after rumors of a cursed healer and a contested mate claim. Griffin refused to leave the chamber for more than minutes at a time. Each refusal cost him another fragment of political ground, and everyone knew it. At second bell, Mara sent a formal summons written on blue council vellum. Griffin read it, folded it, and fed it to the fire. At third bell, another messenger came, this one pale and sweating. "Lower hall testimony has begun without principal parties," he said. "Theron's witnesses are swearing your sanctuary invocation is tainted by undisclosed mating influence." Griffin's mouth set in a hard line. "Let them swear." The messenger swallowed. "The council requests Luna immediately." Luna stood before Griffin could answer. "If I keep hiding behind your body, they will call every truth I speak coerced. I need the circle, eventually." "Eventually," he said. "Not while Kalen is this fragile." As if summoned by the argument, Kalen's back arched in a sudden tremor. Luna dropped to the bedside, fingers at his throat. Pulse erratic. Breath snagging. She signaled for the poppy thorn, but the vial she reached for was not where she had left it. She froze. On the tray by the hearth sat a replacement vial, same glass tint, same wax plug, but tied with red thread instead of plain hemp. "Who changed this?" she demanded. One guard frowned. No one entered. The younger healer, returning with fresh water, stopped short. "I set no red thread vial." Luna uncorked it and caught the scent, sweet at first, then metallic underneath. Not poppythorn, a trigger distillate. It would have driven Kalen deeper into the poison sleep within minutes. Someone had gotten close enough to swap medicine under armed watch. Griffin took the vial from her and held it to the light, eyes turning feral bright at the edges. "Find who touched this wing," he ordered the guards. "Seal every stair. No one in council robes moves unescorted." The guards bolted. A horn blasted from the courtyard, not the long warning from the outer cut, but the sharp internal alarm reserved for breach inside the second wall. Another horn answered from below, then a third. Closer. The door flew open and Captain Ivar stumbled in, blood from a scalp cut running down his temple in a thin line. Lower Hall is compromised, he said, breath hard. Theron's rogues attacked during testimony. Enforcers split ranks. They seized the East Gate winch for less than a minute, enough to force entry for 3 mounted men. He braced one hand on the frame. Theron is inside the keep. Everything in Luna went cold and clear. Ivar kept speaking. He sent this ahead. He threw a small iron key wrapped in black ribbon onto the floor. Says it opens the antidote coffer. Says he hands over the vial only to Luna in person at moonrise. He is moving toward the upper infirmary corridor with witness escort and armed support. Kalen made a strangled sound on the bed, half cough, half choke, and then his pulse dropped so sharply under Luna's fingers that she felt the space where beats should have been. Griffin drew his blade. From the corridor beyond the door came shouting, steel striking steel, and Theron's voice carrying upward through the stone in smooth, ringing command. "Hold your line," he called to his men. "Do not harm the king. Bring me Luna alive." "Hold your line. Do not harm the king. Bring me Luna alive." The words rolled through the corridor with practiced authority, and the sound of steel striking steel sharpened into close, brutal rhythm. Griffin moved to the doorway, blade angled low, and Luna saw 3 things at once. Ivar bracing himself despite blood in his eyes, one guard dragging a fallen enforcer clear of the threshold, and Theron striding up the stair in dark travel leathers, flanked by 2 rogues and a tribunal witness who still wore his contract ring like a holy relic. Theron looked older than memory and more dangerous for it. The polished charm remained intact, but it had thinned into something predatory, all calculation and appetite. His gaze found Luna immediately, skipped over Griffin as if the Alpha King were a temporary inconvenience, and settled on the scar beneath her collar with a proprietary calm that made her skin crawl. "Luna," he called, almost tender. "You always did choose difficult rooms," Griffin answered before she could. "You breached under witness law and opened violence in my keep. Speak one more step forward, and I end this at the door." Theron lifted both hands, smiling at the armed men as though this were a negotiation between old friends. "I came with terms, not war. Your son's sequence is collapsing. She knows the key I hold." He nodded toward the black ribboned iron key on the floor. "Give her to me, and the antidote algorithm is yours." Kalen choked on the bed behind Luna, a thin rasp that tore through the chamber. She dropped to him, fingers finding his pulse, and felt the stuttering emptiness between beats deepen. The false vial had nearly done its work. Griffin's order snapped across the threshold, sending 2 wolves into the corridor line, but his attention kept breaking back to the bed. Theron had engineered the moment precisely. Force the father to split between crown and child. Force the pack to watch him fail either way. A rogue lunged at the doorway. Griffin met him in one clean movement, drove him back with the flat of his blade, and kicked the door half shut without taking his eyes off Theron. Ivar slammed the bolt into place. The chamber shrank to firelight, ragged breath, and the pressure of imminent collapse. Theron's voice came through the wood, smooth as oil. "Luna, listen to him fight for pride while the boy slips. You know I do not bluff with chemistry. Bring me your hand at moonrise and I deliver the full antidote. Defy me, and Kalen dies inside your song." Luna stared at the black ribbon wrapped around the key. Not tied. Twisted with a left-handed pull she had seen 100 times on Marrow inventory locks. Theron never surrendered the true instrument first. He sent decoys to establish control, then demanded compliance for the real release. Her mind aligned with cold clarity. I am standing in the old cage again, only now the bars are legal language and witnesses with rings. He wants the same surrender in a nobler script. He wants me panicked, grateful, isolated, trading myself for one breath at a time until no part of me remains mine. I know this machinery. I learned its gears by surviving them. I am terrified. I want Kaelin breathing. I want this to end without blood. But if I walk to him, he will poison the next child and the next, and call it governance. I am done being the hinge his door swings on. I choose the room where truth can be forced into daylight. I choose it now. She rose, turned to Griffin, and spoke fast. That key is a lure. If he had the antidote complete, he would have sent dosage proof with witness seal. He did not, because he still needs leverage. Griffin held her gaze, reading the decision before she finished. Call Moon Circle trial at the ancient basin. Under witness law, he cannot refuse without voiding every claim he brought. Luna, Griffin said, voice rough with urgency. He will try to take you in transit. He will try either way. Through the door, Theron laughed softly. Are you done whispering strategy, little bird? You do not have enough time left for dignity. Luna stepped to the threshold and shouted back, every word aimed not at him, but at the corridor full of listening wolves. I invoke Moon Circle adjudication by blood witness. I challenge bond claim, poison claim, and succession sabotage at the Stone Basin under Stormline law. The corridor noise hit a sudden break. Even Theron paused. Griffin threw the bolt and opened the door a narrow span, blade still in hand. Stormborn recognizes invocation, he said into the passage. All parties to the basin. Any interference is treason in open record. By the time they forced a path through the upper hall, rain had turned from needles to heavy silver sheets, drumming on slate and armor as if the mountain itself were counting down. Wolves packed the stair landings, council robes crowded the gallery, and tribunal witnesses pushed forward to preserve their legal theater. No one was neutral now. Luna walked between Griffin and Ivar with her satchel strapped across her chest and 2 guards at her back. Kaelin carried behind them by the younger healer wrapped in dry furs, his breaths shallow against her shoulder. Luna had authorized the move herself as medically necessary. The basin runes were the only immediate way to force admissible proof and expose Theron's sequence before moonrise. She kept 2 fingers on Kaelin's pulse while the healer team monitored breath and warmth, step by step. The ancient basin lay in a lower court open to the sky, carved from black stone veined with old runes that only lit for royal blood or sanctioned judgment. Torches hissed in the rain. Theron descended from the opposite arch flanked by rogues and his witnesses, expression sharpened by triumph he had not yet earned. He spread his arms to the circle. You call for law, Luna, then hide behind the king who scents like your new obsession. Tell them what happened in that chamber. Tell them he used mating influence before testimony. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mara stood near the front with the hawk-faced elder, unreadable, scribes poised. Luna stepped into the basin ring and took the ritual blade from the altar niche before anyone could object. I will tell them more than that. Theron's smile thinned. Be careful. False royal declarations are death by your own statutes. I remember the price. She cut her palm in one swift line and held her hand over the basin. Blood struck stone. For a breath, nothing happened. Then silver light chased the carved channels, spreading in branching threads until the whole ring blazed beneath the rain. Gasps broke from the watchers as the truth runes answered her pulse and climbed her wrist like living script. Name yourself, Mara called, formal and cold. Luna lifted her bleeding hand. Luna Windrider, daughter line of Ilawan Windrider, hidden in service by coercive contract. I submit blood for truth binding. The basin accepted. Light surged upward, a column of rain-laced radiance that trembled and then widened into image. Memory flooded the air above the circle in fractured silver scenes. A courier in Stormborn livery taking a coin stamped with Theron's crest, a vial exchange in a stable alcove, red thread tied around a replacement bottle, Theron's voice issuing measured instructions about delayed collapse and witness timing. The final image sharpened with brutal precision. Theron's hand delivering Moonbane packet and saying, "The child sleeps, the king panics," and she returns where she belongs. In that exposed sequence, Luna caught the missing order. The trigger cascade only locked after the delayed cedar phase. She snapped a reversal sequence to the younger healer. True Poppythorn first, Juniper Ash Saline second, while she held Kalen in Windrider Lullaby tether. Under Basin Runelight, his pulse stopped dropping. Shouts erupted. One witness stumbled back, ring hand shaking. The hawk-faced elder swore under his breath. Mara closed her eyes once, then opened them with iron resolve. Theron moved before the memory fully collapsed. He drove through the ring edge, ignoring the burn of active runes, and reached for Luna's scar with clawed fingers. "Enough spectacle," he snarled. "You come with me." Luna did not retreat. She drove her bloodied palm toward his chest and spoke in the old Windrider command tongue her mother had buried inside lullabies. Silver wind exploded from the lit channels, not air but force, shaped like chains, spiraling around Theron's wrists and throat in luminous coils. They slammed him to his knees at the basin edge so hard stone rang beneath him. His rogues lunged and were thrown back by the same surge, skidding across wet flagstones. "I reject false claim," Luna said, voice carrying over rain and shouting. "I void coercive mark before witnesses. I bind accuser pending blood judgment." Theron strained against the restraints, muscles shaking, fury finally stripping elegance from his face. "You cannot bind me with servant hands. Watch me." Griffin stepped into the circle's outer line, rain sliding from his hair, amber burning through his gaze with something ancient and lethal. "Theron Stormborn," he said, each syllable formal. "I challenge under blood law for child poisoning, treason, and breach of sanctuary." Theron bared his teeth. "Accepted." The circle shifted, runes dimming to dual protocol. Luna backed to the edge with Ivar between her and the crowd, silver chains holding Theron until the opening bell of law sounded from Mara's staff striking stone. At the first strike, the restraints dissolved. 4 exchanges decided it. Theron came fast, low, aiming for Griffin's injured side from an old campaign scar. Griffin turned the blade, took the impact on guard, and drove an elbow into Theron's shoulder to break momentum. Second exchange, Theron feinted high and kicked for the knee. Griffin pivoted, caught the leg, and sent him stumbling across wet runes. Third, Theron drew a hidden short knife and slashed for the throat. Griffin trapped his wrist, twisted, and the knife clattered into the basin with a hiss of steam. By the fourth, Theron was breathing hard, rage outrunning discipline. He charged with both hands, claws extended. Griffin stepped inside the arc, struck once with the hilt to the sternum, then swept him down and put steel to his throat as thunder cracked over the court. Behind Luna, Kalen coughed. The sound cut through everything. The younger healer cried out, half laugh, half sob, as the boy curled against her and drew a ragged but waking breath. Luna turned just long enough to see his eyes flutter open and fix, dazed, on the torchlight. Theron heard it too. Pinned under Griffin's blade, he spat rainwater and hate. "She is mine by mark and fear." Luna walked to the basin center, lifted her still bleeding hand, and laid it over the scar at her shoulder. White gold light gathered under her palm, bright and clean. Pain lanced through her, sharp enough to blur the edges of the world, but she held steady as the old carved mark blackened, cracked, and burned away into drifting ash. When she spoke, her voice did not shake. "You never had me. You only had my silence." Mara raised her staff. Judgment witnessed, claim voided, treason proven. Griffin did not look away from Theron. "By Stormborn blood law, sentence for poisoning an air and waging treason under false witness is death and severance of rank. No memorial rights, no faction inheritance." For the first time, uncertainty crossed Theron's face. "You would kill your former bonded before council review. You killed that bond when you touched my son." The blade fell in one swift final stroke. Theron went still on the stones. the rain already washing crimson into thin, fading lines along the basin grooves. No cheer rose, only the long exhale of a pack released from a held nightmare. Griffin stood, breathing hard, and faced the witnesses. Record it all. Every seal. Every name. One by one, Theron's tribunal witnesses removed their contract rings and set them at Mara's feet. Luna swayed once as the adrenaline drained out of her limbs. Griffin crossed to her immediately, not taking over, simply steadying her elbow until she found her balance. Behind them, Kalen coughed again, louder this time, and reached weakly for his father. Griffin's hand tightened around Luna's for a single beat before he moved to his son, and the storm above the basin began, at last, to break. Rain still ran from the court stones when they carried Kalen back to the infirmary, but his breathing no longer vanished between one heartbeat and the next. Luna walked beside the healer who held him, one hand under the boy's shoulder, the other pressing two fingers to his pulse as they climbed. Griffin followed close enough that his sleeve brushed hers every few steps, not crowding, simply there, a steady pressure against the shaking that had finally found her bones. In the chamber, Captain Ivar posted fresh guards and shut the door on the corridor noise. Mara entered with two scribes, a sealed evidence chest, and no ceremony. "We do this now," she said, voice roughened by rain and authority. "Before rumor edits the record." On the table, item by item, the night was pinned into law. Theron's letter from the iron tube entered under his seal. The black ribbon key, logged as decoy and marked abandoned to deception after Luna demonstrated the left-handed twist and the false ward groove. The red thread vial, uncorked by the elder healer and identified as trigger distillate, not medicine, then sealed for destruction under healer oversight at dawn. The contract rings from Theron's witnesses, surrendered and struck from tribunal recognition in Stormborn territory. The courier coin, shown in the basin memory, recovered from Theron's belt and entered as corroboration. Luna's forged servant papers were placed down last. Mara studied them, then slid them back across the table. "Those bought you entry to save our heir," she said. "They are not evidence of guilt. Keep them, or burn them." Luna fed them to the hearth herself, and watched the false name curl into ash. The hawk-faced elder stood near the door throughout, jaw set, offering no apology. When Mara finished dictation and asked whether any challenge remained, he looked once at Kalen, sleeping with color returning slowly to his face, then lowered his gaze. "No challenge," he said. "I was wrong in open hall, and wrong at the basin." It was not grace, but it was record. The older gate guard who had first judged Luna disposable came in after, helmet in both hands, and managed only, "I should have listened sooner." She nodded, and that was enough. By full dark, the true antidote sequence was complete, assembled from Theron's seized satchel and Luna's corrections from the basin memory. She administered it with the elder healer witnessing each drop. Kalen coughed, grimaced, then slept again, this time with the deep, ordinary rhythm of a child's exhausted body healing itself. Griffin stayed at the bedside until the tremor left his hands. When the keep bells marked midnight, he turned to Luna. "He is safe for the first time in days," he said. "Come with me." They crossed the upper bridge in silence, wind clean after storm, torches guttering low. The moon temple sat above the inner wall, small and ancient, carved with weather-soft runes and open to the sky through a broken stone ring. No guards entered, no council followed. Only the two of them and the hush that came after violence ended for good. Griffin stopped at the altar basin and faced her fully. Amber glinted through his irises, not feral now, simply unguarded. "I will not take what you do not give," he said. "Not because law requires it, because you are you. If you want time, I wait. If you want no claim at all, I still stand beside you when the hall turns cold." "Speak plain, Luna." The knot behind her ribs loosened so suddenly she had to breathe through it. I spent years being told surrender was devotion, she said. I do not want anything that feels like that ever again. She stepped closer until their boots nearly touched. I want what we built in that room with Kaelin, chosen, witnessed, mutual. Her voice shook once, then steadied. I choose you, Griffin Stormborn, as mate, as partner, as the man I trust with my life and my name. His eyes closed for a heartbeat, as if the words struck somewhere deep and long empty. Then he unfastened the collar of his tunic and bared his throat to her, head bowed, the most vulnerable line of him offered without hesitation. Then witness me, he whispered. Yours, if you want me. She lifted her hand to his neck first, palm warm against his pulse, and waited until he leaned into her touch. Consent moved between them like breath, clear and deliberate. He touched her shoulder where Theron's scar had burned away, thumb resting lightly at the junction of neck and shoulder, asking without words. She answered by tipping her chin and baring the place for him. When his teeth broke skin, the pain was sharp and bright, a clean strike that stole air from her lungs. For one fierce second she braced for old panic, for memory to hijack the moment. Instead, warmth surged outward from the bite, not consuming, but opening. The ache transformed into a deep, resonant pull that spread through chest and spine, like locked doors yielding one by one. Griffin held her steady with both hands on her back, careful even in hunger, reverent in the way he took and gave. Mine, he breathed against her skin, and the word carried no cage, only vow. Yours, she answered, fingers fisting in his tunic. The bond flared. Gold and silver runelight spilled from the temple carvings, spiraling around them in thin, luminous threads. Through the new link she felt him with startling clarity, the raw terror at Kaelin's stillness, the centuries of disciplined loneliness, the instant he had recognized her and chosen restraint over possession, the relief so profound it bordered grief. In return, she let him feel what she had hidden from everyone, the locked rooms, the brand, the relentless training to disappear, and the stubborn ember that had kept refusing to die. Nothing was softened, nothing was edited. He stayed. She drew back enough to meet his gaze. Mate, she said, and smiled through tears she did not hide. Then she rose onto her toes, turned his offered throat with one hand, and bit at the junction of neck and collarbone. His breath punched out on a low sound, half pain, half wonder. Her mark sealed with a rush of heat that raced through both of them, then settled into a steady hum beneath skin and bone, two pulses finding one cadence. He shuddered once and gathered her in, forehead to forehead, arms around her like a promise he intended to keep in daylight, not just in moonlight. Mate, he said again, voice breaking on it. They stood that way for a long time, holding each other while the bond quieted from blaze to glow. When at last they moved, he kissed her brow, then her marked shoulder, and she rested her cheek over his heart, listening to the rhythm that now answered hers without fear. 3 days later, the great hall filled before dusk, every den represented, every banner lowered in formal witness. Kaelin walked between Luna and Griffin under his own strength, one small hand in each of theirs, solemn until he saw Captain Ivar and grinned hard enough to lose all ceremony. Laughter broke the tension in a brief, warm ripple. Mara stood at the dais with the council record in both hands. Theron Stormborn is entered as executed for treason and child poisoning, she declared. His rogue faction has disbanded under oath and disarmament, witnessed at the Basin this morning. The Hawk seat is vacated by censure, pending new vote. Sanctuary law is amended. Coercive marks are void in all bond disputes without exception. She turned to Luna. Luna Windrider of Stormborn, royal blood witness true, healer of the air, chosen mate to Griffin Stormborn. Do you accept the mantle of High Luna with equal authority in law and healing? Luna looked at Griffin, then at Kaelin, then out across faces that had once measured her worth by a brand. I accept, she said. Mara placed the moon-worked circlet on her head. The runes along its inner band lit in silver, matching the mark at Luna's shoulder. The pack bowed, not to pity, not to rumor, but to recognized rule. Before the hall emptied, Luna asked for one more decree and spoke it herself from the dais. The east guest wing, unused for 2 winters, would be converted to sanctuary for escaped servants, branded wolves, and debt wards seeking lawful protection. The elder healer stepped forward at once to volunteer staffing. Ivar offered guards trained in non-coercive intake. Mara approved funding from seized rogue assets. No one called it charity. They called it policy. That night, the fortress finally went quiet. In Griffin's chambers, Hearthfire painted the stone in amber and gold. Kaelin fell asleep sprawled between them, one hand tangled in Luna's sleeve, the other tucked against Griffin's ribs as if making sure both stayed. Outside, the mountain wind moved soft across the battlements. Luna lay on her side and watched the boy's lashes rest against his cheeks, watched Griffin's stern face ease into peace she had not seen before, and felt the completed bond resting warm and steady under her skin. Their marks glowed faintly in the dark, answering each other with every breath. The moon above Stormborn was full, bright, and no longer a threat. It was simply light over a kingdom that, at last, was home.